welcome to another Scots Whay Hae podcast. And today I'm joined by Scotland's national chef and MasterChef The Professionals winner, Gary Maclean. Hello, Gary.
Hiya, how are you? Thanks for having us.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. I'm really looking forward to this. We're going to talk about your new cookbook, Scottish Kitchen. If you're looking at the video version, I have one here, a beautiful book, but also your life as a chef. So first of all, why did you want to write this book, Scottish Kitchen?
I've always been passionate about Scotland and Scottish food, and I wrote my first book not long after coming off from winning MasterChef. And my kind of thoughts were, at the time when I was sort of coming up with ideas, I kind of went down the route of my sort of education background, you know, my teaching. So what I wanted to do was to write a book that taught people to cook, and that was a kind of driving force. But what happened once the book was out and I started doing kind of demos and getting out and about, and I do a lot in the States, I was selling the book to everybody, and everybody just presumed that it was Scottish. And the actual fact was that I had a kind of rule with my last book that I didn't want to put Scottish in it, because I wanted to sell it to all our pals south of the border. Yep. You know, there's 50 million of them, and I sort of sales hat on, I thought it's got to be kind of general, and I didn't want to be sort of pigeonholed into the whole Scottish thing. But I started feeling guilty, you know, that people were buying, because all my demos and stuff were always all about Scottish produce and you know, that sort of thing. And then at the end of the demo, you're at the table signing and selling books, and it was all full of curries and risottos and chicken tikka masalas and all that sort of stuff. So I kind of felt that I owed a lot of people a Scottish book. And the other thing, through lockdown as well, I started coming up with new ideas for books, and I had lots of different ones that I'd sent to the publisher, but the Scottish one was one that I really thought there was a missing mark in the book market for a book that celebrated Scotland's traditional food, that was actually written in a recipe format that people can go to the supermarket and buy and replicate. And I also thought there's not many Scottish cookbooks that are doing traditional food that provide kind of modern photography. So I thought there was a market there, and I bought them all. You know, I bought a lot of Scottish cookbooks. Every day I was buying something online. It's one that I didn't have, and I was reading through it, and I just felt, you know, it's time we celebrated our food. You know, if I was a French chef, you know, there'd be no question I'd be talking about baguettes and you know, coq au vin and all these sort of classics. And why shouldn't we be celebrating our steak pie and our butteries? There's no reason why not.
And that's exactly what it is. You know, I've read a lot of cookbooks myself over the years, and this is perhaps the most Scottish one that there is. You know, you've got not just a chapter on haggis, you've got the way to make your own haggis. You've got recipes which use lots of native berries. You've got sweets and treats like clooty dumpling, black bun. I'd never seen a recipe for black bun before. You know? And also things that your mum or my mum or our friends would make, like tablet and fudge and, you know, things like that. I mean, there are lots of fine dining recipes in there as well. But I'd never seen, I think, lawn sausage in a cookbook, that kind of thing.
No. And again, it's the kind of thing that I had to research. And being honest, because I'm a chef, and the best people who make lawn sausage are butchers, the best people that make haggis are butchers, the best people that make a Scotch pie are bakers, you know. So I had to really phone all my pals, basically. I had to phone up and say, look, and again, it's that sort of thing, because I travel a lot and because I do a lot with the kind of expat communities around the world. You know, the first thing they want to do, and when I say expat, even you know, our pals that go down south, and you'll probably agree, when you go visit, they send you a list of stuff, don't they? And it's lawn sausage or Stornoway black pudding or a Scotch pie that they want to see. So I kind of thought, you know, this book could not be complete without the Scottish food from my childhood. What do I remember? You know, going to the football and sticking a Scotch pie in your pocket because you've got 2 bovrils to take back and that sort of thing. So, you know, and that's every bit I think is important to our Scottish heritage as haggis and clooty dumpling.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. But as I say, you've also got, you know, you're using things like rabbit, which is still fairly rare in cookbooks and things like that. So, you know, it is Scottish kind of produce across the board.
Yeah. And there was another big thing I wanted to do, and again, Scotland isn't traditionally or historically known for a kind of, dare I say, a veggie option.
Yeah.
You know, but again, looking at research and reading books and you know, just and hiding away in a corner and looking at the history of our food and how we used to eat, you know, veg was fairly abundant.
Yeah.
You know, 200, 300, even 400 years ago. You know, Glasgow had 7 markets. I think Edinburgh had about 7 or 8 fruit markets at the time. And what I used for inspiration for that, I used a community garden. There's a community garden called the Wash House Garden in the East End of Glasgow, Parkhead or Toll Cross nearly. And I just couldn't believe, I had been going there for a few years, judging competitions and getting to know the people. And I needed to get a balance in the book, you know, because people are definitely looking for that kind of option. And every single item in that chapter was grown in the East End of Glasgow. And basically what I did was I walked around with the gardener. We picked what was nice at the time, and I took it home and I made the dishes up. So, and again, it's harkening back to our kind of lost past where we did eat quite well when it comes to fruit and vegetables.
And before kind of talk a bit more about the recipes themselves, you mentioned that, so for me, a lot of cookbooks, they either fall into one of 2 categories. They're either kind of coffee table books that make, my first one was White Heat, Marco Pierre-White's famous book. Now, I wasn't going to be making a lot of the stuff out of that in my kitchen, but it was a beautiful thing to have. But then you've got your kind of go-to cookbooks that are all dog-eared and splashed with wine and all that kind of, and learning ones. I think your book kind of falls in both camps. It's got a foot in both camps. It's got beautiful photography and illustrations in it. But then you've also got these recipes which almost demand to be, you know, tried
to be
out.
used. Again, I think the photography is a standout in this book. So it's absolutely stunning. You know, I couldn't believe, you know, it was all done at home. So it was. And the photographer came in, and in this room we turned into a studio for a couple of weeks. Right. So I had the photographer here for, you know, 10 days, and basically just turned the whole thing up. But again, I think the other thing, there was a lot of support with this book as well from, you know, from my mate who gave me all the plates, who runs a company selling crockery. And he said, when I told him the idea and the thought process behind the book, no bother. And he sent me like 300 plates. So all of this all comes together, I think, really well. And again, it came at a time, you know, writing it, that there was a bit of light at the end of the tunnel as well. So there was an opportunity to getting out and meeting suppliers and picking up food and sort of stimulating everybody's brain after, you know, the sort of 2 years that we had. No, and
it's interesting. I think you talk about the kind of collaborative process. It sounds like it was more collaborative than even I thought. What was it like to work on a cookbook? I've talked to a lot of writers, and you know, that's kind of solitary thing until their novel or their piece of non-fiction goes to the publishers. But it sounds like, you know, you're even bringing in suppliers or people else.
I mean, for me, I've been a chef for 35 years, and I think it takes you about 25 years to realize that you're never going to know everything. You know, where you get to a point in your career where you can say, do you know what, I don't know that, I'm going to speak to somebody who does. You know, and again, I mean, even to be fair, in my last cookbook, I did have, you know, a lot of people that I spoke to and things like that. Again, people in different fields, bakers, pastry chefs, all that sort of stuff. So, and again, it's just making sure that I'm getting the right information. And there's a lot of regional stuff in the book, you know, and I'm from the west coast of Scotland, but when you think about Scotland's traditional iconic recipes, you know, things like our broth smokies and bridies and butteries and all that sort of stuff, it's all up the East Coast. So what I wanted to do was to try and make sure that I got genuine stories of those foods, and whether it's a modern story or a story about my boss who used to, you know, from Aberdeen, who used to be really critical of butteries and things like that. So I tried to get that in, and again, it's making sure I've got a friend from Forfar, and she would bring me bridies down, because again, the West Coast, and I don't know, Alison, where you live, but in the West Coast, a bridie comes in puff pastry.
Right.
So it does. And I always thought a bridie was a puff pastry item, and it's not until you pick up a book and there's a kind of, it's almost like it's a short pastry, but it's quite a stretchy short pastry. And again, online's a great resource. You can sit and actually watch the very best, butchers making these bridies, or bakers making these bridies. So again, it was making sure that everything was in there that was right. And I took there was a lot of phoning and a lot of chasing up. But again, second time round, right, in this book, I was much more organized. I was much more, in terms of my word skills, I was much better, organizing files. And my last book must have been a nightmare for the publisher, because it was sent in, I wrote the recipes that I loved, and they kind of had to figure it out where it fitted within the book. But I kind of had a clear vision of where this was going. And, I was working to a page count and things like that. And again, working with Black and White Publishing, they just produce some of the most beautiful books ever, But again, it is solitary, though. You're sitting there, you're typing away. I sit right now, and you're typing away, and you're working on a recipe, and you're reading it over and things like that. And it is quite a scary thing that then goes away, and then the next time you see it, it's in Waterstones.
Yeah.
So it's quite scary. I remember being terrified for my first book in case I'd made a mistake, in case someone would, email me and say that, that recipe didn't work or anything like that. And I think that book's been out about 3 years, and I've never had any of that. So a wee bit more confidence in my own ability to make sure I got the right information over as well.
And as you explained, you're really busy doing other things and traveling around. So do you have to almost fit this in between everything else?
I did it at night. So obviously my day job, I work at the City of Glasgow College. So I just actually enjoy writing. I enjoy the process of getting something finished and then logging it away and then starting with a blank page. And, I enjoy that ticking off kind of scenario. And again, for somebody that was really bad at school, later in life, when I went to university and stuff like that, I really did enjoy it. And I quite find there's something quite relaxing about, just producing something, and it's special. It's I don't know if any of your MD watching has ever written a book, but there's something, the book's going to live forever. You're not, so there's something quite nice about putting something down in paper and kind of keeping it.
And I think that's perhaps particularly the case with cookbooks, because they do get handed down. I've got a couple of my mum's old favourite cookbooks and things like that. You still go back to certain recipes.
Yeah, most definitely. And again, especially when you're talking about Scotland's heritage, and one of my fears was that I missed something. I'm sure I've missed loads. And if there's any recipes I have missed, certainly somebody send them in, but for Scottish Kitchen too. But I don't know. I think we're lucky in Scotland. We've got such a rich larder. Yeah. And we've always had that rich larder. And, it's delving in and finding the stories and where did that food come from? Why did we eat what we eat? Why are we so good at smoking fish and all that sort of stuff? So I love getting into all of that. And obviously, from a seafood point of view, Scotland's fishing industry once upon a time was absolutely ginormous. I mean, it still is, but it was a dominant industry in Scotland, particularly the northeast. The herrings and things like that, and again, once upon a time it would have been the wild salmon and stuff as well. So no, we're lucky.
I know, absolutely we are. Do you think there's a sort of a greater appreciation of that now? Because I trained as a chef back. That was my first training, my first job as well. And you were taught, I was at College of Food Tech, so you were taught a French style.
So was that.
So a Scottish recipe,
I know, as it's crazy how things have changed, and I think there's been a seismic change around the world for looking at your own food. Again, I went to Food Tech, and in fact, I still work there. And I tell young chefs now that my final exam was in French. We learned everything in French. All the cuts were in French. Everything was in French. I mean, even at that time, I worked in a French restaurant in a big hotel.
Right.
Service was run in French.
Right.
So checks get shouted on, to homard, all this sort of stuff. And I was doing a demo one day and I was talking to the audience about it, and I'm sitting there thinking, there was 7 of us in that kitchen, and the person born the furthest away was the sous chef from Wales. There wasn't even a French person in the kitchen, but you've got Welshmen, Irishmen, Scottishmen, guys from Govan, guys from Arisland, all speaking French to each other because that's what we felt was right. And this is the 80s.
Yes.
And again, I think about 20 years ago, I used to open lots of restaurants. I worked for a big company, and we used to buy sites, we used to buy restaurants and whatever else and convert them into what fitted in the area. So we had lots in the West End, we had lots on Byers Road and Ashton Lane and things like that. And I think this was restaurant number 7 that I had to open, pretty much a stone throw from the other 6. And I'll be honest, I ran out of ideas. I had Italian, I had Indian, I had a cinema, I had French, I had all sorts of stuff. And I thought one day, wouldn't it be wacky if we did a Scottish restaurant? I mean, wouldn't it be really, and saying that now, thinking, I remember being nervous going to the owner and saying, how do you fancy doing a Scottish restaurant? And how mad it was. And there was a resistance to the rest of the sort of senior team, but we did, and it's still there. As is 6 others of the same name. But I just remember that at the time being such a revolutionary sort of idea. And I think it was Viv Lumsden, who's a great food ambassador for Scotland. I think she was writing for one of the sort of Scottish magazines, Scottish Life, or I think it's still going, can't remember, but it's a really, really good magazine. She did this whole kind of 3-pager on the revolution of Scottish food, 20 years ago. And it certainly has been, but I see it elsewhere in the world. People are starting to be proud of their food, and we're you've got technically non-Scottish restaurants, particularly, the sort of independents, they're really hanging their hat on Scottish produce, but doing all sorts of lovely stuff with it, whether it's a burger restaurant or a Thai, so that word Scotland now actually means something in Scotland when it comes to food, which is great.
Absolutely. I think people thought it was professionally, you didn't cook Scottish, that was for the home, and that's kind of changed completely.
I mean, I remember going back when I worked in the big hotel in the French restaurant, and we used to get our deliveries from Paris, from Rungis Market in Paris. We get 2 truckloads a week, and we would have coquilles and Jacques écossaises. So we had to buy our scallops from France, but they came from Scotland. Yeah. And even then, you're thinking to yourself, this can't be the best way of doing it. But it came in with the most beautiful white peaches and foie gras and everything else. So, but again, I think we've got a way to go, though. When it comes to that, obviously Brexit and stuff like that's highlighted how much we rely on getting our food into other markets, and the more we buy, as homegrown customers, the cheaper it all becomes. So long may it continue.
No, absolutely. I remember talking to lobster and scallop fishermen in Argyll, and they said the majority of this stuff's it's going on a plane and it's going over to Paris.
Yeah. I mean, and obviously, the amount of seafood that we're churning around the world. I've seen salmon and Outer Hebrides coming in, and it was I remember it was a Wednesday, and that particular plant, they process the American salmon because they have bigger salmon.
Right.
And I was then in New York on the Friday, went into the fridge, and the salmon I had seen on the Wednesday was in the fridge in Fifth Avenue on the Friday.
Wow.
And I was using it for a dinner on the Saturday. I mean, so we've got our logistics right, and getting this stuff around the world. Brown crab going to China and Japan and things like that. The amount of Michelin star restaurants, I think there's 20 Michelin star restaurants in Tokyo alone that use Scottish lobster. And again, part of my kind of, traveling and stuff like that is to help promote our produce. And the night before I have to go do a speech in front of a bunch of chefs or a bunch of buyers, I just Google Scottish lobster, Scottish salmon, Scottish scallop, Scottish this, Scottish that, depending on what country I'm in. Mm-hmm. And what it does is it flags up all the menus with Scottish produce in it. And I put the names of those 3 Michelin, 2 Michelin star restaurants in my speech, and I don't know them.
Yeah.
But the guys in the audience, the guys in, you know, the chefs in the audience know who it is, you know, so they do all the heavy lifting. You know, if you can get that, you know, 20-minute research in the night before and change the names of the restaurants. But, you know, if you're in Singapore or something like that, it's you know, it's and for a chef abroad to get the word Scotland on their menu is a big deal.
Sure.
You know, because it is a real mark of quality. And I think if Scottish people knew that, or I mean, a lot of Scottish people know that, but I think if Scottish people knew that, they'd be really proud of, you know, what we do is food for food. You know, we're a tiny country, and we've never been able to stack it high and sell it cheap. So we've always had to go down that quality route. And then obviously with our weather and our landscape, you know, we've got the perfect conditions for things like beef and lamb and things like that.
So what made you enter MasterChef then, the professionals, to move on to that? So, because if I remember rightly, you were one of the older competitors there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm the oldest professional winner ever.
Yeah.
Even the first winner's still 10 years younger than me.
Yeah.
who was a student at the college as well. The first winner at MasterChef was first winner of MasterChef Professionals. Derek Johnson, I think his name is. He's a food techer. So I think he was there when I was teaching. I don't remember teaching him, but I was teaching part-time when he was there when he first went in. So he's still, I mean, he's probably more than 10 years younger than me. But I think the thing was, we use, in college, we use MasterChef Professionals as a teaching tool.
Right.
So, you know, the first half of the show, first half of the sort of the series, the chefs have to come in and they do that skills test, and they kind of always brand the skills test as this basic task sort of thing. You know, they're getting chefs to make a mousse or bone out a chicken or do a bit of fish filleting or something like that. So inevitably, most of them mess up. You know, and it's, you know, for one reason or another, the way they set it up and the way they do it's really good. I love it. It's my favorite bit of telly, even though I had to go through it myself. And so the students would come in the next day, you know, first year, second year students would come in and they'd be around the table and you'd be doing your dem, and somebody would say, "Did you see that guy from the Three Rosette Manor House who couldn't bone out a fish?" You know, and these young students, you know, we're teaching them those fundamentals. We're teaching them the sort of foundations of what they need to know. And for us as educators, it's a great tool to say, well, guys, this is why you're dedicating a couple of years of your career in getting those foundations done. And don't get me wrong, throughout their course in college, they'll maybe fill it 5, 6, maybe 7 fish, unless they do the fish corner in the restaurant. But at least they've done it, they've got an understanding, they know where it should go, they understand how to do it, all that sort of stuff. So when and if they ever get it in the industry, they've kind of touched it and they can understand it. So it was just great for us. Coinciding with that, I was part-time at the college for 13 years, whilst running and opening restaurants. And in 2010, I went in, a full-time job position came up, and I thought, you know what, it's time. I always knew I would go full-time, but 2010, I thought, you know what, I'm ready to kind of dedicate my life to education. And so I got the job. There was about 54 applicants, and I managed to get in with the skin of my teeth by all accounts. But I got in. But as soon as I started, I pretty much started the culinary team. Mm-hmm. So the college, for years and years and years, you know, maybe 20 years before I went full time, they did a lot of competitions and were very successful. And it was a kind of barren period for a while. But I thought, as a kind of extracurricular thing, I'd quite like to sort of get the college's name back into the competition circuit. So between sort of 2010 and 2016, I think we'd won about 20 national titles, and I think we'd won about 3 or 4 international titles. So, you know, as you'll get the conversation about MasterChef in the morning, all the students are saying, well, chef, you can show us how to do competition. You know, can you put your money where your mouth is? And so I did. So rather daftly, I did. And again, looking back on it, I mean, I was always really calm on the show. I was never, and I always remember being calm. I always remember being pretty organized. But again, it took me maybe a year until after I'd won that I kind of realized why I was so calm. And the thing is, I'd spent so much time with the students, training and practicing competitions. And, you know, you practice a competition 10 times and then you have to go in and win.
Yes.
Whereas with MasterChef, see, as long as you're not the worst, you're fine in most rounds.
Yeah.
So the hardest rounds to get through is the first day. So the first day you're in, you've got skills test, and then you've got to do a signature dish. There's 6 competitors and 3 go home in the first day. So they pretty much cut the pack in half, you know. So half of the chefs that go in there only ever get 1 day's filming.
Yeah.
So getting past that for me was quite important. And the next round, I think there was a sort of surprise round, which I knew I'd be fine on because I was quite good on my feet, and I was, being honest, I was quite confident in my own technical skills that whatever come up, I would be fine. And I think pretty soon, I think it's like your third day, you're doing the critics round. And I wanted to get to the critics round because I had 2 amazing dishes that I had practiced about 14 times. So I knew that I knew the dishes were solid. I knew I would get them done in time, and I knew they'd be a wee bit different from what most folk were doing. So I was quite confident. And after you get past that critics round, you're then kind of flung in a pot with 12 other people, and they start going 1 or 2 at a time. So your odds get better the further you go. So I was quite confident in getting there. And again, when I was there, you know, you're phoning home and stuff like that, and you know, how do you think you'll get on the day? And I used to phone my wife and I say, if I don't go home, so and so is going home. So I could kind of pick who was going next to a degree. Right. And in many cases, in fact, in most cases, I was right. But it's an amazing thing to do. And anybody that's listening, whether it's amateurs or professional, if you've got any inkling of doing it, just get in there and do it. It's a fantastic experience, and the crew are amazing, absolutely amazing. They really are.
I wanted to ask you actually about the life as a chef, because I would say similarly, if anyone's out there thinking, oh, I quite like the idea of being a chef, it's hard work. I did it for 20 odd years, but it's a great life. I found it a great life anyway.
I think, again, the journey that I took is probably very similar to yours. Going back, you go in at 8 in the morning, you go home when you're told, and you're paid not a lot of money. At the moment, there's never been a better time of being a chef. A young chef can make more in a day now than a young chef 5 years ago would make in a week.
Really? Wow.
Mm-hmm. There's amazing opportunities out there. See, if someone wants to work hard and get into a good place, there's never ever been a better time to do it. But go to college first.
Well, from because you were saying, it often gives you an advantage if you're going for a job. If you can, I've worked in kitchens where I was the only one that could fill out a fish. You know, so someone
it depends on the level. What you'll find is that the guys who are running the not so good places will dish college. You know, they won't see the relevance in it. And all they us just teach our students, you know, if they ever end up in a situation where they've got their head chef saying, why are you at college? The answer is because they want to do better than you've done. Yeah. You know, they want to earn more money than you earn, you know, that sort of thing. So, and it's a long-term investment.
I worked for a few head chefs. I wouldn't have said that to them.
No, well, the thing is, young people now can say what they like because they can walk out of one job and walk into another.
So is that the situation? Is that there's just so many opportunities out there that really good chefs are highly sought after?
Even really bad chefs are highly sought after, I'm afraid.
Wow, that's interesting.
It's a changed world. Again, what happened, obviously, we've had lockdowns and stuff like that. And I think what happened during lockdown was there was career chefs who had left school, went to college, done their job, worked every Friday, Saturday night, every Sunday lunch, all that sort of stuff, missed out on birthdays, Christmases, kids being born, all sorts of stuff like that. And then what happened during lockdown is the restaurant shut and chefs had to find an alternative way of living. And what they discovered was that there's other ways out there where they don't have to work every weekend. They don't have to work every Sunday. They can put in for a holiday and not get made feel bad about it and stuff like that. So a lot of chefs did find other ways who would have otherwise never have found that and probably still be in cooking.
Yeah.
So
I can remember.
it's a great time to
Yeah.
join the industry. It's a great time to get into education as well.
And are places in the courses you run at City College, is it competitive to get into those?
Basically, there's a couple of ways of getting in. We've got level 5 courses that fundamentally sort of recruit directly from schools.
Yeah.
But again, if someone's coming into the industry that's retraining, and we get a lot of that as well, you know, if we've got mature students, they can come straight in and do HND. So there's different ways. There's fast tracks, there's short courses, there's taster courses and things like that. And again, if you apply, again, our wonderful education in Scotland, you know, in most cases, you know, if as long as they turn up clean, neat and tidy, you know, there's spaces there. And again, obviously applying at the right time as well. So keeping an eye on open days and websites and things like that. And
in general, how important do you think kind of teaching cookery is to people, not just professionally, I mean in general, because it seemed to me it's something that got lost. I certainly didn't get it at school. It wasn't until I went to college, you know, that I started to learn at all.
Yeah. I think it's absolutely vital that we should be teaching kids to cook in primary school.
Yeah.
We should be teaching kids about food straight away. And I mean, I could probably do a whole podcast on this. The problem is that the way, dare I say, the way we learn to cook in Europe has completely changed.
Right.
In fact, we don't learn to cook. That's the problem. So historically, we would be taught, or dare I say, the female of the house would be teaching the other females of the house how to cook. You know, 100 years ago, and obviously things like World War II changed that when we get working parents and all that sort of stuff. And then we had that crazy time with things like TV dinners in the 70s and all that convenience stuff that was supposed to be the savior, which was all terrible. And what we have to do is find a new way of engaging the population with food. You know, the kind of things I hear that, you know, to cook fresh is too expensive and all that sort of stuff. I mean, in my personal sort of family, my gran was the last person to be taught to cook at home.
Yeah.
And at school, and she was born in 1910.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, she was born 110 years ago, and she was the last person that was kind of traditionally taught to cook. When I went to school, I was hopeless. I really was hopeless at school, and I took home economics. Well, they all take home economics first and second year, and I was the best in the class. And for somebody who was the worst in every other class, to being the best in home economics was a revelation for me, and I absolutely loved it. But I had a great teacher. I had a great teacher that encouraged us and engaged us, and I wanted to do well in her class. You know, so good education. Home economics, I think, should be teaching people to cook.
Yeah. For
health and well-being and understanding what a tatty is and what happens if you boil it and why does it break down and all that sort of stuff. So we should be teaching everybody how to cook at school. Everybody should be getting taught to cook. And I necessarily, and again, I know the industry is absolutely desperate for staff, but we shouldn't be using that class to recruit chefs, because that puts people off and kind of sidelines anyone else, because other people have got other interests. So I think with good food education, the people who want to come into the industry will come in, like I did.
Yeah.
You know, because I get taught to sew at school. Yeah. I get taught to work a sewing machine. I get taught how to iron and make a bed and all that sort of stuff. I mean, my school, Knightswood, I went to, we had a flat. It's like a 1950s flat where we used to be parents. It's kind of weird to think about it now, but I mean, that wasn't that long ago. You know, it was in the 80s, so it wasn't that long ago. So, but I think, you know, everybody should be having to understand food. And a lot of my role as national chef is out in schools.
Yeah, right.
And it's great that we're now back at it. My diary's just full of school visits, you know, from primary schools to high schools to, you know, kids that are in care and all that sort of stuff. So it's great getting out, and food's a great tool to sort of level people, I think.
Yeah,
so it is.
I think that's right. And I think going back to the book, that's what Scottish Kitchen does. I mean, there's so many things wrapped up in it. There's memories, there's food memories, there's family memories, but there's the connection. As soon as I opened this book, it took me back to people and places and meals as well.
Yeah. And that's what it did for me when I was writing it, and thinking about, the sort of, I mean, my story on steak pie is all about Hogmanay, and working in restaurants. Yeah. And in Hogmanay, we always did the big 10-course gala dinner. And for me, my main mission that day was to make it home for the bells, make it home. And it was my mother-in-law's I was going to at that time, because she made the best steak pie. And we sat, 11:30 steak pie. But talking about first foot and talking about our traditions and stuff like that as well is quite funny. And again, as a kid, what it's like. No, somebody always gets sent out.
Yeah.
Somebody always get put at the door with a bit of coal and a bottle of whiskey. And it was never me, because you had to be tall, dark and handsome. So I couldn't go it. I was short and ginger. So I don't think anybody wanted me as a first footer. So, but no, I think we're lucky in Scotland. We've got a lot of food stories. And I'm sure other areas, I know Yorkshire's got a big thing going on with their food and things like that. But I think we're lucky in Scotland because we've got a kind of country that's united with food, I think.
Yes.
Because, in the most part, we all have a story to tell on pretty much every recipe in that book, I think, of how we remembered it, and whether it is a pie or a bridie or something like that. I think there's a story to be told, a memory, potted hoch, that sort of stuff. I used to go to the butchers, when I was 6-year-old, go to the butchers and pick up a potted hoch from my dad and think to myself, oh, never eat that. And, the older and wiser you get, and you think, I wish I'd bought 2 every time I went, because it's amazing. But
and it does cover all over Scotland. I hadn't really heard of Butteries until fairly recently, and then you discover them and you think, oh, these are amazing. Why haven't I known about this? But every region does manage to kind of, even if it's not unique to them, it's a variation on a lot of these things.
I mean, I was kind of, the more you research, and if I was to draw, I mean, I can't actually consider putting a map in the book of where the food comes from, but so much of it is from that East Coast.
Yeah.
And it's maybe worth doing a bit of research as to why that is. I don't know obviously when you look at the West Coast in the map, it is, we've got Glasgow.
Yes.
And then Inverness, and the two shall never meet, so I think the West Coast, I think, is known for its produce as opposed to its historical. But again, things like macaroon bars are in there. That's a Glasgow invention. The morning roll. And again, I grew up next door to Morton's Bakery, so
right.
It was a great. And again, for years I've done a kind of story about bigging up our Scottish food and our Scottish heritage, and you talk about. I do this whole thing. There's this amazing bread that takes 24 hours to make, and it's proved for 20 hours, and sourdough and all that sort of stuff. And it's a Morton's roll. But in Scotland, we fling in a bit of square sausage and some ketchup, whereas the French or the Germans would have this, this gastronomic delight up there with a crown on it. We just
the top table, absolutely.
So.
Well, Gary, it's been an absolute delight to talk to you, I have to say. It's been quite a career. Just before we go, what's next for you?
I am back on the road, which is great. Right after this video, I'm going to record a video to tell everybody in Alaska that I'm coming to the Highland Games. So I'm going to the Alaskan Highland Games. So I'm going to be doing some historical food demonstrations out there. So again, I'm doing food from Outlander and all that sort of stuff. So which is great. But no, it's really good. So it's good getting traveling again. Recently back from Tartan Week in New York, which was good. The first one since 2019. It's great seeing everybody there. But what else am I doing? A lot of pop-ups. I'm doing a lot of book signings. Next week I'm in St Andrews. I'm in Edinburgh. So quite a lot going on. So
Excellent. So people can catch you, get a copy of the book and get you to sign it.
yeah, that's it. That's the idea.
Well, best of luck with it. I think it's an essential addition to any kitchen. It really is. It's a fantastic book. Thanks for taking the time to chat to me, Gary.
No, not at all. Thank you.
And we'll be back soon with someone completely different.